25th, 2016, Tex McIver spent the day golfing with his wife Diane. Afterwards, they went back to their ranch home in Putnam County, where Diane's friend Danny Joe Carter was spending the weekend with them. At the end of the day, all three headed back to Atlanta in the McIver's SUV. Danny Joe was driving because Diane and Tex had been drinking wine. Diane was in the front passenger seat and Tex was in the back seat. When they got to downtown Atlanta on the connector, they hit traffic, so they took the Edgewood exit. As they got off the road, Tex was concerned about the neighborhood they were in, so he asked Diane to hand him his gun from the console. They continued driving up Piedmont Road, and somewhere between 12th and 14th Street, the gun went off. The bullet traveled through the front passenger seat and struck Diane. She died the next day at the hospital. Tex McIver says it was an accident, but prosecutors say it's murder. This is the trial of Tex McIver. Huge day inside the courtroom. The judge allowed the jury to take a look at the SUV and get inside the SUV, the same one that Tex McIver was in when he shot and killed his wife, Diane. No cameras were allowed there, but our photographer, Jefferson, was there as the jury was watching it. First, describe the scene for us.
All right, we're in a concrete sally port where they...
On Sunday, September 25th, 2016, Tex McIver spent the day golfing with his wife Diane. Afterwards, they went back to their ranch home in Putnam County, where Diane's friend Danny Joe Carter was spending the weekend with them. At the end of the day, all three headed back to Atlanta in the McIver's SUV. Danny Joe was driving because Diane and Tex had been drinking wine. Diane was in the front passenger seat and Tex was in the back seat. When they got to downtown Atlanta on the connector, they hit traffic, so they took the Edgewood exit. As they got off the road, Tex was concerned about the neighborhood they were in, so he asked Diane to hand him his gun from the console. They continued driving up Piedmont Road, and somewhere between 12th and 14th Street, the gun went off. The bullet traveled through the front passenger seat and struck Diane. She died the next day at the hospital. Tex McIver says it was an accident, but prosecutors say it's murder. This is the trial of Tex McIver. Huge day inside the courtroom. The judge allowed the jury to take a look at the SUV and get inside the SUV, the same one that Tex McIver was in when he shot and killed his wife, Diane. No cameras were allowed there, but our photographer, Jefferson, was there as the jury was watching it. First, describe the scene for us.
All right, we're in a concrete sally port where they bring in prisoners who are being transported to Fulton County Courthouse. It's in a basement parking lot. It's like 2 stories tall. It was cold. There were a few transports came in while we were waiting. We were up along this side of the wall, and all the action was on the other side of the room.
So who was there? Who was there?
The whole defense team, the state team, Clint Rucker, Bruce Harvey. I did not see Don Samuels. I think he stayed upstairs. Abate was there. The 2 females, I don't know their names, they were there. They're also nice.
The judge?
The judge, of course, was there.
How about the jury?
Tex was there. The jury was there as well in 2 groups. They brought 7 jurors down first, and then they brought 8 jurors down in 2 waves, 2 groups of jurors.
All right, how close are you to the jury and the SUV when you're observing them?
At first, we were about 35 feet from the truck itself, from the SUV, and then the judge and the juror was about another 20 feet beyond that.
On the other side?
So we're on like a triangular situation.
Okay. This jury had an opportunity to examine the SUV. What was the process? How did they do it?
The jurors went up one at a time. Each juror took about a minute and a half. Some jurors took as long as 2 minutes. They could walk around the entire truck. Some got in all 4 doors. Some only got in 2 doors. They all went to the main door, which was the back seat behind the passenger seat. That was where the main action is. That's where the dowel is. That's where Tex was sitting.
So there were actually jurors who stepped up and got inside the SUV in the same seat that Tex McIver was in?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You could get into that seat. They encouraged you. If you want to get in, get in. Just don't disturb the dowel.
All right,
Don't
let's
pull
talk
out.
about the dowel. So this is the dowel you're talking about right here.
Yes.
So the dowel is sticking out the back. Where's this part? Give us some
This-
perspective here.
Was like here, right here. It was in the center of the seat, right there. That's this. But it was up a little bit, maybe knee height. Where your knees were, that's where the dowel was. And if you sat in this seat, you could not, the forensics guy said it was important to follow the dowel.
To follow the dowel. Now, could you tell whether or not the jurors were trying to do that? From where you were, could you see if a juror was trying to pretend like they were holding a gun?
From where I was standing, I would have been over there. I would have been on that side of the car, and it was tinted windows, so I couldn't see what the jurors were doing inside. This is when the media got a chance to go up into the car. That's what we did.
So wait a minute. So the jury does their view. You said some of the jurors got in, some did not get in.
Some did not. Some did. Some did not.
Okay. And they were allowed to sit in each of the 4 seats.
Yes.
The one rule: don't disturb the dowel.
Just don't disturb the dowel. The dowel is there for a purpose. Don't move the dowel.
Any notable reaction from any of the jurors from where you were?
From where I was standing, no. It just seemed like they were just looking at another car.
How about Tex McIver, because he's there? Any reaction from him?
Tex was taking notes in a notebook the entire time, watching every juror, watching it all go down.
All right. So now the jury clears out, and then the media is allowed to examine the SUV?
Absolutely. This was a rare occasion. Leon Gates said media never gets to see this kind of thing. They let us approach the truck. No
How
pictures.
close did you get to the truck? Where were you?
I stood right here.
You were right there.
I stood right here next to the
All
truck.
right.
Next to the truck.
What struck you about what you saw inside?
The placement of the dowel, if you believe what Gardner, the forensics scientist, says.
For the defense.
For the defense, yes. Follow the dowel. So if you make your hand a gun and your finger is the barrel has to line up with that dowel.
Okay, so
And
were you
because
doing
of
that?
Yes, I saw that happen. Because of the placement of the armrest with the door closed, it would have been impossible for you to have the gun like this and match up with the dowel.
Because you have to go on a little bit of an angle?
Because it was just the height was
Oh,
off.
the height was off.
The height was off. But if you turned your hand either like this or the other way, laying it flat like this, either side, it matched up perfect. I mean, it was uncanny how much it lined up with that dowel. It was like a piece of a puzzle.
So from your perspective, the defense version and explanation of how that gun had to be was consistent with your own examination of the scene.
I saw it. Yeah, I saw the whole thing. Yeah, it was perfect. The way he explained it, it can't be like this because your hand, it just wouldn't fit. But this side or this side, he says it over and over again in his testimony. And the questions and the jury questions, it had to be like this or it had to be like this.
All right. Anything else you think the folks at home should know about what only you got to see and none of us did?
I just thought it was amazing that they let us get that close. They say the media never gets to see up close and personal that type of evidence, and letting us see that, it was pretty awesome. It was crazy. I mean, it was something that I'll never forget.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, folks, welcome. Still here, Late Feed Law. I'm Vinny Politan. We're inside now, and we've got a special program for you tonight here on Late Feed Law. Take a look at all your questions, all your comments. Post them. We'll get to them in just a moment. But I want to tell you what's going to happen right here, right now, because tomorrow morning, closing arguments. We want to give you a little bit of a preview with some mini closing arguments from our legal dream team tonight. We've got with us Meg Strick, the criminal defense attorney, but working for the prosecution tonight. And for the defense, Randy Kessler, he's an Emory Law professor and a trial attorney. Are you both ready and prepared for closing arguments?
Yes, we are.
You bet.
You bet. All right, all the evidence is in court. So this is what's going to happen tomorrow morning. I mean, they went through the jury charges, everything else. But really, for the purposes of what we're doing tonight with the Dream Team, it's all about murder. Okay, we know there's going to be a lesser included. We know there are some other charges. There's the felony murder associated with the assault. But we're not going to talk about that. We're talking about the top charge, the charge that everyone's talking about, which is the malice murder. So in the courtroom, prosecutors always get the last word. Sometimes they get first and last, but rather than having you go twice, let's just have the defense go first,
All right.
and then the prosecution, and then we'll take questions and comments from the folks at home. Does that sound good?
Great, you're going down, Meg.
All right, up first for the defense, Randy Kessler. All right, Randy.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a privilege to represent Mr. Tex McIver, and I thank you for your time, your patience, your consideration, and for your verdict of not guilty. So, what was it? You know what it was? It was an accident. And we don't have to listen to everybody else. We can listen to the people that were there. We can listen to Tex McIver, said it was an accident. We can listen to the driver, Danny Joe, accident. And the victim, his wife, said it was an accident. An accident is not murder. An accident is an accident. It's not murder. Did he plan this? They're going to say he planned this? Is he really better off now? Is that how you plan a murder? Do it with somebody there that can witness it? Do it when you're right next to a hospital? It doesn't make sense. He didn't plan it. Now, is his life better off? Did he murder her to put himself in a better position? Oh, sure. Now he's on trial for murder. He's being accused of all these things. He doesn't have his wife. He's lost his job. He's not going to make a living as a lawyer anymore. He's lost the respect of the community. Why would he do this? But the bottom line is, they have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And beyond a reasonable doubt doesn't mean, yeah, we convinced the jury that he more likely did it than not. There has to be no reasonable doubt. Not a little bit of reasonable doubt. No reasonable doubt means not that he possibly did it, not that he probably did it, but the jury, you, ladies and gentlemen, have to believe that there is no doubt, no reasonable doubt, no reasonable, normal doubt at all that he did this. How can you not doubt that he murdered his wife on purpose? There's tons of reasonable doubt. Remember that when you're deliberating, and please return a verdict of not guilty, which is a verdict of the truth. Thank you.
All right, up now will be Meg Strickler for the prosecution, giving us a mini version of what we can expect to hear tomorrow.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to Mr. Kessler and hearing about the defense. Well, now it's time to hear about what the prosecution has already proven through 70 witnesses. As you've heard, you got to listen to the facts. All of the facts here are the truth. And when truth and facts get confused, you have Tex McIver. So remember the facts. What do we have? We've got guns, lots of them. Do guns just go off by themselves? No. Do guns by people who have piles and piles and piles and piles of guns, who purport to be experts on guns, know to accidentally shoot them off? No. Can you inform intent in 2 seconds? Yes. Would that equal malice murder? Yes. As you see here, he was just handling the gun and accidentally went off. We had a bump in the road. Do you remember an opening when we heard the number 6? 6 stories, Tex said that evening. 6. I want to reiterate 6. If there was facts, you wouldn't have to tell 6 different versions and stick 6 different motley versions. They were all over the place. Why? Who knows? Edgewood, Black Lives Matters, we don't know where we are, girls, I'm scared, homeless people. But where Diane worked was a block away. He doesn't know the area, lived in Atlanta his whole life, yet doesn't know Atlanta. Goes to Emory, all facts. Why? Why didn't we call 911? Why are we calling our lawyer? Why are we calling Bill McCrane? Why are we calling Mr. Dickerson? Why? Those are facts. Now the accident theory just doesn't make sense. You have the gun, ladies and gentlemen, the gun in a plastic bag. How many people do you know keep bags like this and it accidentally shoots through a hole? Why? Because we don't have any residue flying anywhere. It makes it real easy. As you saw in the pictures, the gun was laying like this. Easy to come and get and shoot her. And as you saw in the pictures, you can see he had had a few drinks. He was pissed. She was ragging on him about eating too many Cheez-Its. He had any money. Money was the motive. Money was the freedom, the key to freedom, key to get rid of the nagging. They drank that night. She'd spent all weekend. He was tired and tired of her. There is no sleep disorder. How many times, ladies and gentlemen, have you ever heard of any story ever ever of someone falling asleep and shooting somebody in a car or anywhere else. The story doesn't fit. Why? Because it's not a fact. Take that back to the jury room, and we have to look into Tex's mind. Look at his words and his actions. What did he's too many stories. Was he handling the gun? Was he sleeping? Did he hit a bump in the road? Right out of the gate, he wants money. But does he pay for her ashes? No, he's cold and callous. Does he go and sell all her stuff immediately? Yes. Facts, ladies and gentlemen. Facts, facts, facts. He wanted to maintain his image of wealth and power, and he used the facts that you will hear in this trial to return a truthful verdict of guilty. Thank you.
All right. Why don't you take the seat right over here. Taking your questions and comments, folks. I'm going to just grab my phone over here. I'll grab this thing here. All right. I'm going to sit over here, Joe Flo. Is that okay? Does that work for you?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Over here?
Let me work.
If you need me to move around, let me know. So let's start first with who really has that burden tomorrow. I know, in fact, the prosecution has to prove the case beyond any and all reasonable doubt, but this case is a little different because we know Tex McIver shot and killed his wife. Does that in any sense put some sort of burden on the defense tomorrow to explain something and try to prove something, Randy?
No, I think it actually heightens the burden on the prosecution. Usually they have to prove who shot and what they shot with. And this time they didn't have to prove that. So they now have a burden of proving what was in his mind. I think it heightens the burden on them. They have to prove not who shot her, but why he shot her. I also didn't mention in my closing argument the will. I mean, the prosecution's going to have to get around that. I sort of left it alone when I did my mock closing, hoping that someone on the jury was going to say, the prosecution said that she had a second will that he didn't like, but they didn't show it to her. So they've got a burden there, too. They've got to say, they've got to come up with an excuse for why they couldn't produce it if they mentioned it.
How do you get inside his mind? How do you convince the jury, beyond a reasonable doubt, what Tex McIver is thinking about and what's going on between those ears?
Well, you can't really tell except you see him manipulating the situation. He's always manipulating. He's calling his lawyer right after this happens. Does he call 911? They prove that they had the phone available to call, and the first phone call he makes is not to 911. That's problematic. And then you see throughout this situation with Bill McCrane, the messages he left for Danny Joe and Danny Joe's husband shows he wants to manipulate the situation and make it so that he can make it the way he wants it to be.
But if he premeditated this, if he was thinking, I'm going to murder her, if he'd ever thought about it, he would have thought, then I have to make it really look like a murder. I have to call 911. I have to do all those things.
Alcohol.
So obviously...
I put alcohol in, and that's why that happened.
So he had a plan, but he just didn't execute it right.
No, he didn't have a plan. He just got pissed, and you can inform intent that quickly.
And then he
Shot her. He's pissed. He's done.
Okay.
That's my theory.
Well, it's a theory, but you don't get convictions on a theory, in my opinion.
Rena reacting to the prosecution closing argument here, and Rena saying all of these facts have only created background noise, no real motive, no love affair, no one witnessed cross words between them. All of these facts do not prove reasonable doubt. Not convinced by those arguments. You have to have proof, and the facts don't add up to murder.
Ouch.
So, is it a problem? How much of a problem is it for prosecutors that there's some arguments about the finances, about was he or was he not better off with her alive or dead? Can they go with just a plain financial motive, or do they have to intertwine in the financial motive the freedom to be able to do whatever he wanted to do with the money? Because as long as Diane was there, she controlled it because she was the one making the money.
Well, that's right. She controlled the purse strings. And as you see, it's building blocks until he exploded. She was taking care of the bills. She was making more money. He lost his partnership. He was about to retire and lose even more income. All of that led to more and more and more and more, and all of a sudden he's done. That's not what the prosecutor was trying to prove here. What they've tried to prove is he's a jerk. They got that one done. You got to admit on that one. But they also proved that she's dead. They got that one done, right? So that you can prove, get intent rather quickly. And what doesn't work is his million stories. None of it works. His universal signs of grief, we didn't have any. I mean, he didn't show anything that made it normal to say, oh my God, oh my God, I shot my wife on 911. That's the normal reaction.
Okay, but those are all distractions. The facts of the case, you're doing A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F plus G equals something. it's got to be A plus B equals C. This is a murder. It's got to be, we know he did it, this is how we know he did it, and he's,
But why did he take it to Emory? Why did he go to Emory? If he is from here,
if you're looking at
the
motive this
valet.
and motive there, right, you've got 100 little bitty facts, but to convict somebody of murder, it's got to be clear as, hey, there's an email
Callous
saying to his
disregard.
friend that he would rather see her dead than not inherit under the will. There's no smoking gun, despite the fact that there's a gun. There's not
No
really-
smoking gun except for the actual smoking gun.
Correct.
Which
And it
Danny
was
Joe
shrouded
testified to
in a bag.
seeing smoke come out of it.
Yes.
Here's a great one from Betty Joe. And
No
this goes
relation
to
to
the
Danny Joe.
defense and the defense case. The defense was talking about this sleep disorder, and they seemed to put a lot in it because not only did the sleep expert talk about it, but then you had the masseuse who maybe was or wasn't wearing the boots come in and testify about Tex sleeping and curling his hands and all this stuff. She says very simply, and this is something that I think the jury could say, if Tex has a sleep disorder, why did he not fall asleep during the 20 days of trial? Right? I mean, obviously she's being a little sarcastic, but there's no evidence of this sleep. Isn't a sleep disorder almost undermine the credibility of the entire defense in this one because it's ridiculous?
He can't win that. I'm sure he was made sure to stay awake by whether it was medication or whatever it was. It would have looked contrived. If he fell asleep...
Well, my real point is
he had
why
to stay
even
awake.
go with this sleep disorder?
Because you need to answer the question, why would a normal person fall
Because
asleep
he was
with-
drinking wine all night, but then it's involuntary manslaughter,
But
right?
there's-
Because you shouldn't have alcohol in the gun?
But if you have a juror,
You can
or
lose
two,
no matter
or
what.
three, that thinks, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I need to understand why he might have accidentally done this. You got to give him something to hang their hat on. Maybe some will blame it on drinking. Maybe some will say, that's the answer I was looking for. You got to give him a reason for why he did it accidentally. And this is something that some jurors might use to justify in their mind, okay, that makes sense.
Let me throw this out to you, and this just kind of dawned on me in this moment. I just saw it, like, woo, I think it appeared over your head, right?
There you go. A lot of things.
Is this
a lot
a
of things
case?
over my
Is
head.
this a case where both sides are reaching for too much?
You know-
That Tex McIver is reaching for, it was an accident, but I'm guilty of nothing. There was nothing. I did nothing wrong. It was an innocent accident because I have a sleep disorder. Versus prosecutors saying this is malice murder, and maybe the truth is somewhere in between both of them, in that he didn't intend to do it, but the guy was obviously reckless with that gun and the alcohol. We know the Yeti and the wine and everything else going on that night, and he wants to just walk away from this, which he shouldn't be able to do, and prosecutors want to lock him up for the rest of his life, which maybe, arguably, they shouldn't do.
He should show remorse, but he can't get on the witness stand and say, I'm sorry, and show his remorse, because that opens him up to cross-examination. I think the prosecution has a real problem, because there were times when the prosecution got angry and defensive and argumentative, and almost like they're too vested in a positive result, in a victory. And that takes away from their credibility to some degree. When you see somebody really going after the defense, you think, wow, do they just want to win at all costs, or is it about the facts? It should be even-keeled, and for most part, this was a very well-tried case. But I think the defense held on a little longer as far as being even-keeled. And ladies and gentlemen, don't do it because I think it's true. Don't do it because the prosecution thinks it's true. Here are the facts on a silver platter. You all figure it out. And I think the prosecution sort of took the losing end on that balance.
This is my argument. Just look at that one picture.
Oh, come on.
I mean, look at that. I mean, that just shows that he is very familiar with guns. And if you're really familiar with guns, there is no way you would endanger your loved ones with a gun.
Oh, how many
gun safety expert.
Oh, how many people have so many guns and they have a family member shoot themselves?
Well, no, but he is the expert.
And how many people had accidents that own guns?
No,
that are
it's
good gun
usually
users?
somebody who's a gun person in the house, and then someone else gets
You know what?
hold of the gun.
If he wasn't a gun user, then he wouldn't have had a gun in the first place.
Correct.
He wouldn't be here.
Exactly.
So you're saying he's guilty because he owns a gun?
No.
It's not a gun.
He owns quite a few, which means he knows how to handle it.
Forever.
That's why the
So maybe he got
accident
two
doesn't
counts.
fly.
Speaking of that, one of our viewers, Latonia, what about the gun? How do you explain a gun just going off?
You can't.
It doesn't make any sense. And from my perspective, watching this trial and seeing his different stories that are out there, the most troublesome thing for me from Tex McIver is they're saying it's a sleep disorder, yet in the interview with, and I think we even have the clip here, I may even be able to get to it. In the interview with investigators, he's saying he was handling the gun. So how do you, I was handling the gun and then it went off, versus I'm sleeping and it went off, versus we hit a bump in the road, and it went off.
That's
I mean,
That's why he did not testify. That would have been perfect cross-examination questioning for him. The jury, they're leading the horse to water, and they don't want to dunk the horse's head in the water. The jurors that want to believe that this nice person would not have shot his wife, most people think that average people will not shoot their spouse. As long as that's the presumption and we're presumed innocent, he doesn't need to give them any reason to think otherwise.
The fact that he told all those stories is what kills it for me. Why is he being so insanely inconsistent as to what occurred? That's really problematic because
You would agree he's going through a lot.
Yeah, but if you're in grief or you're in shock, you would fix things and say things later that would help himself. He's later still trying to manipulate the situation to do what he needs to get done.
I think he tried to be in control. I think he tried to fix
Yes.
things, and I think those were all wrong, and I think those were all bad. But, he would do the same thing.
He's just a callous fellow.
Stick with me for a second. Let's say those were mistakes. He shouldn't have done those because those make him look guilty. But if he was innocent and he was worried that he was going to look guilty, he could make the same exact mistake as if he was actually guilty. A person that's worried about going to jail for life for murder is going to do things that are stupid like he did. But you could be worried about going to jail for life because you did it, or you could be worried about going to jail for life because it looks like you did it.
Yeah, well, why didn't he pick up his ashes? Why didn't he pick up the ashes? Why is he selling all her stuff right all the way? Why is he talking about his ex 10 minutes after? Why is he having the masseuse stay in his room?
Because he murdered his wife? That's why? That doesn't answer the question.
It shows
They're
that
bad
he,
things. The answers to your question do not lead to a result of murder.
Yes, it does. It shows that he has callous disregard towards her, doesn't like her, and was done with her.
Yeah, it was callous, and he made a stupid mistake by having a gun that was pointed towards her go off while he was in the car. That was also a dumb, callous mistake.
Yeah, well, like I said, the guns, he knows how to handle them.
Alicia, in the police interview, and we got her up for you right here, that moment, apparently he was handling the gun, and it just went off. And
Which happens so often.
He describes handling the gun, and he physically does this with his hands when he says it. I was handling the gun. That tells me you're not sleeping.
Correct.
How can you be handling the gun if you're sleeping? You're not.
And this is days later where he could calculate the story. He's trying, and the lawyer's sitting there. This just shows contrived, and if he's innocent, he wouldn't be like this.
And if you convict somebody of murder based on that, then we got
His
a problem with that.
stories are inconsistent. That's the best way to show.
Inconsistent stories do not equal murder.
Inconsistent statements, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them make him not credible.
All right, if you're going to err, would you rather err on the side of having an innocent person in jail or having a guilty person on the street? Our system is designed to err on not putting innocent people in jail.
I'm playing the prosecutor's role. I just want to note for the record.
I understand.
Because I'm a defense lawyer normally. I don't want to lose work here. I'm just saying this I'm wearing my prosecutorial
It's
hat.
good to know how that side thinks so that
Yes,
you can defend it.
exactly. And they are very much a milk monitor type people. They are very conservative prosecutors, and they think this way.
For the record, you are a hell of a defense lawyer.
Right, thank
Marlene,
you.
the gun went off because he pulled the trigger. Could it be that simple?
Yes.
Could they make that argument? I mean, would you make that as a prosecutor?
Except, is it 100% fail-proof? I mean, do you have any reasonable doubt? That's the point. Yes.
What's the reasonable
It
explanation?
might well have been. He pulled the trigger and it went off.
What's the reasonable explanation for the gun to be cocked? Because for the accident theory, the gun has to be cocked. Are they going to even go there and try to explain why the gun would have been cocked?
I mean, there are hundreds of explanations. People that are gun owners are going to know, you know what, if I'm really worried for my safety, I keep it cocked so that if I have to use it, it's ready to go. Maybe he cocked it, maybe he did it while he was sleeping. He's so used to being around guns. I'm sure this guy handles guns in his sleep. And I'm sure he's used to thinking about, he's sleeping,
That's
he's
why
got
I
a gun in
brought
his
up
hand.
the driving to Emory, not calling 911. He wanted that lady
To be
dead.
clear, when you say driving to Emory, you're saying he should have driven to Grady.
4 miles. The Piedmont Hospital was closer, Emory Midtown was closer, Grady was closer, and Grady all over Atlanta. Well, I wouldn't be here but for Grady. It's all over. I mean,
Emory is not a
everyone.
bad hospital. You can't say
No, I went to Emory, you went to Emory, we love Emory. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's not a trauma-based hospital, and it was 4 miles away. They were closer if they had access to 3 cell phones they had in the car and not be calling their daggone lawyers.
If he wanted her to die, he would have said, Emory's this way. Ignore those signs. I know a shortcut. And he would have taken her 15,
He didn't
20
have
minutes.
to because it was still 4 miles away. It's a long drive.
So you're saying she died?
And then they went to the valet. Why didn't they call ahead to have the
If that's the
hospital
case,
people-
how come the prosecution didn't present any evidence that had she gone to Grady or somewhere else, she would have lived? There was no
They
evidence.
showed how far the drive was.
But they didn't have any evidence, any expert testimony, any
Because they don't
doctor's
need to.
commitment.
Because they don't need to. Because it's a Fulton County-based jury.
It's not a common sense argument that.
Allowed in. The hospital wasn't allowed in, right?
There was some sort of motion apparently that made it so it couldn't come in. That's
Well,
right. There was some pretrial motions
I
that
didn't
made
hear,
it
if
so.
I'm on the jury, I didn't hear
Correct,
a doctor
correct.
saying, Had they gone to a closer hospital, had they gone to Grady,
But why the valet?
she would have lived.
Why'd they go to
Well,
valet?
what the testimony was, the difference would have been, it would have been gone straight to an operating room.
Yes.
And then there was, the big problem
Yes.
with Emory was the delay
Yes.
from the emergency room to getting people in place, to getting
Correct.
her.
And
All ahead.
how many times has Tex McIver had to bring somebody to
He's
the emergency
73.
room
Never.
with a shotgun wound?
He's
Never.
73 though, he's
The
lived
first
some
wife
life.
that we have evidence of him shooting and killing. And he shot and killed her. I mean, that's a fact. He shot and killed her. The question, is it murder or an
And he's got to
accident?
live with that. He's already been punished.
And one expert said keys in your pocket can cause a gun to discharge how? And the testimony there was that if the gun is cocked and you're pulling the gun out of your
Oh my
pocket,
gosh.
if the trigger rubs up against something, because it's only about a 2-pound pull at that point, that could, or less, 2 pounds or less, that could trigger literally the gun. So let's just take a look, and there's an incredible debate right now online about guilt or innocence, and I'm getting about, I would say, if I had to guess, 70-30, 65-35 guilty. There's more guilties than not guilties, but there's still a lot of not guilties. And folks want to know what
Just
you
takes
think.
one.
Take 12 in a row.
Yeah, it takes
If-
one.
Out of every 12, how many say guilty?
Wow.
If you don't have 12 united,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and they're debating it with each other.
you don't put someone in jail for life for murder.
Here we go.
On a,
I'm gonna give you
on a
this real
7
quick.
to 5 verdict.
All right, this is on the count of murder. On the count of murder, who wins?